Well, it just got a lot more simple. In this sense, we now know that it's going to be Joe Biden and it's going to be Donald Trump against each other, the rematch of 2020. It will be a different kind of a rematch, and I'll explain why in a moment. But what does it mean? Let's start there before we get into what Nikki Haley had to say this morning, because I think she's had a lot of really good things to say in her concession speech when she said she's suspending her campaign. I'll get to it in a moment. But on March 19th, Arizona holds its presidential preference election. And it's different than a primary, because in a primary, as an independent voter or a party not declared voter, you can choose one primary or the other. You can't vote in both, but you can choose to vote in a primary. So in August, you'll be able to choose a Republican primary ballot or a Democrat primary ballot if you choose to vote in the primary. In the presidential preference election, it is party only. You have to be a Democrat, a registered Democrat to vote in theirs, or a registered Republican to vote in theirs. The reason why that's important is because there will be 9 Republican names on the Arizona ballot, and only one of them is still running. Will there be any protest votes, and will there be any significance to it? Now, if there's, with all the people that are going to vote, it depends on turnout. But this is where it gets, when you start thinking too much about this. If it's a done deal, if Donald Trump is the nominee, there are going to be a lot of people that say, see you in the general. I'll be voting in the primary in August. If things are tight, I'll be voting in that. But there is only one choice left on the Republican ticket. I'm not going to go to the polls to cast a vote for somebody that's already got the nomination wrapped up. And it just seems to be I've got better things to do. But there are going to be people that go out and vote and say, I still want my voice to be heard. Some of them might be protest votes, but we're not going to learn much from it, I don't believe. But now what we're going to see is how the campaigns are going to behave. I do believe that Joe Biden has to go hard after Donald Trump, he's going to go after his legal problems and everything else. He's got no choice. And I believe that Donald Trump is going to point out his 4 years in the presidency with almost no inflation and a border that, whether you liked his policies or not, and I'll give you an example of why I believe he's going to do this. If you look at poll numbers, when Donald Trump was president of the United States, about 35% of the country wanted a border wall. We're in favor of it, 35%. That number in the past 3 years has jumped to 53%, almost a 20-point shift to the other side. So I think that's the way it's going to work. But what we haven't talked about and what we will talk about is the number of independent party not declared voters that have to be swayed. If you look at how Arizona has behaved, the Arizona voters have been siding with the Democrats. Is it candidate? Is it style and platform? What is it? If you look at the latest polling, from Noble Predictive Insights, Mike Noble's firm, they just put out new polls yesterday or the day before it came out, that Arizona Democrats are doing very, very well in elections. But when it's a generic ballot in Arizona, Arizona leans Republican in a generic ballot. That talks more about candidates, and it talks more about campaigns and how they're run. And I think Republicans have to pay attention to that. When it comes to the presidency, Joe Biden won Arizona in 2020, but all polls show Donald Trump winning it this time. The Republicans and the independents that said the better option, let's go see if we can get a better option out of Joe Biden, are looking at it now and not necessarily agreeing. That leads me to hearing a little bit of what Nikki Haley had to say this morning as she dropped out. This is her announcement about suspending her campaign.
Just over a year ago, I launched my campaign for president. When I began, I said the campaign was grounded in my love for our country. Just last week, my mother, a first-generation immigrant, got to vote for her daughter for president. Only in America. I am filled with the gratitude for the outpouring of support we've received from all across our great country. But the time has now come to suspend my campaign.
I think it's gracious. I think it's eloquent. I think that was everything she needed to say about being an American. I thought it was a positive way to spin what's happening. It was the appropriate. I was taught as a young person when I was coaching and when I was playing sports that you win with grace and you lose with dignity. And she lost with dignity right there in what she said. She talked about her concerns about the state of the government.
Our national debt will eventually crush our economy. A smaller federal government is not only necessary for our freedom, it is necessary for our survival. The road to socialism is the road to ruin for America. Our Congress is dysfunctional and only getting worse. It is filled with followers, not leaders. Term limits for Washington politicians are needed now more than ever. Our world is on fire because of America's retreat.
And so I agree with a lot of what she said. I'm not a fan of term limits in this country. I know that there are many people, and it's growing every day, and people that think we should have term limits for politicians. But I don't think it's going to solve the problem. I'm going to be very honest with you. It's not going to solve the problem. And what's going to happen is you're going to see if we have term limits. The House term is 2 years. If you put limits on, let's say, the House of Representatives, what happens when you get somebody really good? And it happens. What happens when you get somebody in your party that's very effective and very good at the job? They're limited on what they can do. And then you got to hope for another good person. But it doesn't eliminate corruption. It doesn't eliminate being lazy. And it doesn't eliminate followers, not leaders. You know who eliminates that? We do when we vote. Hold them accountable to live by what they promised and the results of the promises they made. If we did that, we would turn over a lot more people. We would have people staying a lot less amount of time in the House and the Senate. She talked about the former president. She talks about President Trump being the presumptive nominee.
In all likelihood, Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee when our party convention meets in July. I congratulate him and wish him well. I wish anyone well who would be America's president. Our country is too precious to let our differences divide us.
And she's right about that. She talked about Donald Trump now has to win over the voters that didn't vote for him in the primary. She didn't go as far as she wished him well, but she hasn't endorsed him yet. She said he has to earn those votes. But she talked about the former president uniting the party.
At its best, politics is about bringing people into your cause, not turning them away. And our conservative cause badly needs more people. This is now his time for choosing.
And that was, they're alluding to the time for choosing speech that Ronald Reagan made in 1964, I believe it was, raising money for the Barry Goldwater campaign. So a little shout out to Barry Goldwater there, but to Ronald Reagan. And if you've never heard, if you want to hear a remarkable speech to begin your political ideology with, if you're somebody on the right and you want to start to solidify your political ideologies, go look up the time for choosing speech that Ronald Reagan gave in 1964. It's an amazing speech. But she also went on, I want to make sure we play this. This was a message to young women and girls.
I end my campaign with the same words I began it, from the book of Joshua. I direct them to all Americans, but especially to so many of the women and girls out there who put their faith in our campaign. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for God will be with you wherever you go. In this campaign, I have seen our country's greatness. From the bottom of my heart, thank you, America. God bless you.
Remarkable. I think that was remarkable. Obviously, the American people, at least the Republicans in America, want to see a rematch, and they want to see President Trump as the nominee. But Nikki Haley was gracious. She was eloquent. She was all of those things that you need to be. She was profound. I thought she said all of the right things. And now what happens is, and hopefully we will see, that the former president will lay out his case, and then the current president will lay out his case. If this can be about issues as opposed to personality, I don't think that's going to happen. I think what we are going to see is it is going to be nasty, because that's, it works. It is an effective tool. But it is going to be about personalities. It's going to be about legal troubles. It's going to be on both sides, by the way. It's going to be about Hunter Biden. It's going to be about Chinese business deals. It's going to be about fraud. It's going to be about election denialism. It's going to be about January 6th. And what we need is to talk about the issues that face the world. And we'll see. Hopefully by the time we get to November, we get that. But that's kind of a rundown of what happened this morning.
Thanks for watching the Mike Broomhead Show. Tap to watch the first season of Amazing Arizonans, a KTAR News podcast. You can also click the button in the middle to subscribe.